once again. What's going on, folks? I figured I'd fire it up again here today because I'm going ahead and I'm terminating my red clover cover crop that I drilled into here yesterday. We are rolling. Here we go. So, basically what I got going on here today is I fired up the brush hog here and I put it on the 3-point. Now what I'm doing is I'm just going along here and I'm whacking down all the debris that I drilled into yesterday. So, you know, majority of it was red clover, and it was sitting anywhere from, you know, 6 inches where the deer were browsing it heavy to 2.5 feet tall. So there's a lot of thatch here, and I'm trying to, as you guys can see behind me, I'm trying to make a nice mulch, basically a weed mat, some really fine organic matter that's going to really incorporate into the soil really quickly. Now I don't want clumps necessarily, because that's going to take longer to break down, and it's going to be in one spot, and it's going to choke out or shade out my trenches that I drilled in here. So if I do have a row where it's kind of clumpy, almost like a hayfield, I'll go over that a couple different times to chop it up, break it out, and spread it out. So this is the system that I used last year, but last year I just used a lawn tractor, just our regular lawnmower. And it's kind of a tall task for something like that, especially letting a cover crop get 2.5 feet tall. That lawnmower would have its hands full, and I would probably destroy it, to be honest with you. So if you are going to use this system, if you are going to use this method of, you know, planting and then mowing your cover crop down to basically create that nice mulch over the top of a weed mat, if you're going to do that and you don't have big equipment like a brush hog that I'm using right now, you're just going to use your lawnmower, I would suggest cutting it a couple times throughout the summer to keep that thatch level a little bit less, so you're not dealing with such a tall cover when you do go ahead and mow that down, terminate it. But you guys can probably see back there, I mean, this is spreading it really nice and even. The drill did an excellent job as far as chopping up a lot of the debris in here, and that helps a lot as well, because you're not getting that long stem. You've got maybe 2-3 cuts out of that long stem, so it's a little bit more manageable stalk to deal with, and it chops it up a lot better. And now with this brush hog, I'm dropping it as low as I possibly can, because I want that to basically just skim the crown of those stems to terminate that clover. Last year I wasn't able to get quite as low as I would have liked with that lawnmower, but I was a little bit worried about beating it up too much. So this year, using this brush hog, you know, this is a heavy duty piece of equipment, and I'm not too worried about beating it up, because it's meant to handle big thatch like this, big overgrown grass areas. So I'm pretty excited about running this through here this year. It's going to make my life a lot easier, and it's going to go a lot faster. So you might be able to see back there, I'm even hitting some of the dirt, you know, where it gets uneven, and there's some crowns in the field here where there's rolls. That's fine. You know, that tells me that's a guaranteed termination of that cover crop there. And being the fact that we got rain here last night, all of these seeds are probably starting to soften up and crack open even as early as right now. So I'm not too worried about weed competition overtaking that or growing too quick, because the way this system's set up is this fall blend that I planted last night is going to get a jump start on any of the weed competition that may decide to pop up here. So we're basically terminating this long summer cover crop, making room for that fall blend to go ahead and flourish right up through here. So towards the end of the day, or about three and a half hours in, that live stream cut out on me. I had my settings wrong, so it was recording a copy of my live stream to my SD card, which I don't want, because it ended up filling up. And just since we had a few plots left to do, I just made the executive decision to leave it off and then just get these plots done, because Portland wanted their drill back here today, or yeah, this morning. So I just wanted to get everything done and get it in the ground, get it done with ahead of this rain that we got. Now, any of you guys that were hanging along throughout the majority of it, you saw that we had a little bit of a complication with the seeding rate as far as how fast it was dropping seed and then just making a bunch of extra passes. Based on the fact that I'm putting so much seed in the ground to make up for that browse that the deer are gonna go ahead and do once this stuff starts coming up. You know, I was thinking I was telling Luke, maybe 1 in every 5 of those beans and maybe 1 in every 5 of those peas that I put in the ground is actually going to start to grow. You know, strictly because once that thing starts to grow and it gets about 2-3 inches tall, those deer are going to nip it off right away. So based on that fact, you know, seeding at a really heavy rate takes that into account. You know, so say I only put a quarter of what the pounds per acre that I did with those beans and peas, I would probably never even see one of them, because by the time they start growing and get 2-3 inches tall, the deer have already browsed them off, because they're the most highly attractive seed variety in this plot at that time. So I wouldn't even think that they grew, but in reality the deer just browsed them off before I could even see it. So that's the whole idea behind seeding it at such a high pounds per acre with some of those candy crop seed types. So it's really important now, if you're going to do this method, you're gonna mow after you plant. It's extremely important to get your timing down, because you don't want to wait too long before those plants have started to germinate and they're coming up and growing, and then you come through with the brush hog and knock them all down and kill them. You don't want that. You want to do it, I like to say 1 to 2 days after, just because I like to be on the safe side. I don't even want those plants to start sending those roots down yet. I want to get this thatch put over the top of them as soon as possible after planting, so I don't time it up too close where some of those plants have germinated and started to grow, and then I'm coming through with the mower and killing those. So safe bet is the day after or 2 days after, so you're not worried about losing any of the seed you put in the ground. Yeah, this looks really, really nice. I'm gonna do a little bit more talking today about some of the setups as far as why we have the plots where we do, because I didn't get to that yesterday. We were just worried about getting seed in the ground, honestly. But like this plot in specific might be 1/8 of an acre. And really this plot is not like a game changer on the farm, but we're using this one as just extra food, right? You know, every little bit of acreage adds up when you're talking about high deer density areas and a shortage of fall-time food, because if you have more food than the neighbor and it lasts an extra week in that fall time, that can mean killing a buck and not killing a buck. So I'm willing to do whatever it takes as far as planting a little bit of extra acreage just to give myself that edge and have the food a little bit longer than somebody else, and attract those deer a little bit farther, give myself a little more time, because as you guys know, the season doesn't always go the way you want. You know, maybe it's 70 degrees in the first week of November and the deer just aren't moving, so now you got a bow tag still left in your pocket at the end of November, and all of a sudden it gets cold and you're out of food already. So there's always different scenarios like that, and I try to set things up and plant enough food where by the time I have 2 bucks down, I still have food left. So whether that be into late December or whatever that is, maybe I'm done by opening weekend of gun season. I've got my buck with a bow and I've got my buck with a gun that opening weekend. Maybe it's early like that. You never know. But I always like to have food till at least the end of December. That way I know that, you know, I'll have at least 3 good months to knock 2 bucks down. Now that sounds easy and it sounds like a guarantee, but it is far from that. There's been a couple years where I've eaten a tag, whether it be gun or a bow tag, but for the last 5 seasons, I'm gonna try to think here. I believe I've killed 9 bucks in the last 5 years, which is, you know, in my opinion, that's a pretty remarkable number. And all of them have been really, really, really quality deer. It's not like I'm shooting 1.5-year-old bucks. These are quality deer that a lot of people would be absolutely overjoyed with, and me, myself included. It's been a heck of a run for me, but it just goes to show that when you put in the time, when you put in the effort, you put in the reps as far as shooting your bow, getting stands set up, tagging mock scrapes, doing all that extra stuff, it pays off. I had a couple hammers on my mock scrapes last night. A couple deer I don't know, a couple deer I do know, but I can guarantee you guys that I'm going to be absolutely targeting them extremely heavy. And the thing of it is, they're in a spot where it is overwhelmingly an early season location. So I've got a couple different setups as far as properties that I'm hunting. You know, one of them is a really, really good late September, early October property. One of them is a really good summer property, and then it starts to fizzle out in that first week of October because the alfalfa is starting to brown out because we're looking at a first frost. If they don't have beans there, it kind of loses all attraction in that side. So, and then this farm is more of a mid-fall to winter property. So I've got kind of all my bases covered as far as different areas to hunt at different times of the year. And so the way I'm looking at it is I'm hunting a specific deer, yes, but one on each of those properties. Because I know that, you know, by the time rut hits on the one property, my chances at a buck there are slim to none, strictly because they're moving into the bigger blocks of timber, and you know, they're just passing through. It's more of one of those transition properties where I'm not holding deer per se, but when they do come through, I have a shot at them. Here's an example. I was hunting that farm on November 7th in 2021, and you know, it's just one of those scenarios where there was a doe bedded somewhere near. She had a buck with him, and all of a sudden I'm sitting over a water hole, and it's hot that year. It was close to 60, 70 degrees, and that doe just decided to get up and come to the water hole that I was sitting over, and she drug him right along with her. So no real rhyme or reason to, you know, him coming through there other than just following her. So it's one of those properties where you can't necessarily predict that there's going to be deer there, but during the rut, it's one of those transition properties where if there's a doe in there, or there's been a doe that went through there and she's hot, bucks will come through there. But that early season property is really gonna get my attention here this year. I put a gnarly mock scrape up on that farm, and same night I put that thing up, the deer were already hammering it, and I've had 3 deer that are probably shooters on that camera already. So pretty excited for that spot. It's always been a good spot, but I haven't always had it set up the way I do now with that mock scrape about 20 yards from my stand location, and at the same time I haven't always had a camera there, so I didn't really know what was always there. But this year I'm really gonna put some time in to try to get one killed on that farm. Oof, I just got a hammer. Giant 8-point. Looks like he wants to be a 9 with a split G2. Giant. He's got another 8-point with him. Another good deer. Pretty cool that these pics are rolling through while I'm running alive. On that mock scrape. That's that transition property. There's a bunch of apple trees in there. There's a bunch of acorn trees in there. So that's what's attracting those deer in late September and early October. I've got food plots there. I planted 2 there yesterday with the drill, and then we've got a couple smaller plots that we just broadcast, kind of kill plots that are less than 1/8 of an acre. But a lot of times that's just enough on that property to get them to stop and spend some time there and potentially get a shot at them if we're sitting in one of those spots. Now, another cool thing that we did on this farm this year is, so on the big ag field, we got corn this year, but the guy that plants our corn for us, he didn't plant all the way up close to the fence line. So we had about 8 feet around the back side of the field down here that was not planted with anything, but it was still technically field. So what we did is we went and we tilled that up because it was already sprayed, it was already barren, because it was supposed to get supposed to get planted essentially, and it just didn't. So we went ahead and we tilled it back up to loosen that dirt, and we just went ahead and I planted a pea brassica mix in there. So it's forage peas, it's kale, it's radishes, and there might be some sugar beets in there as well. But basically we added a 1/2 acre of food because our planter didn't plant the whole field. So that's going to be a huge draw and a huge upside for us here this fall, especially as we get into the late season. That's like having a whole nother plot, which is huge. So really, really happy about that. But a lot of times what we'll do on years where he does plant right up tight to the field edge there, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll walk through the corn or beans and I'll just take a whirly bird spreader and I'll broadcast either brassicas. I'll always do rye. I always do rye because it grows in the shade. But brassicas are a little tougher if you have corn. But I've been tossing around the idea of just walking through the backside here in front of one of our good late season box blinds and just broadcasting some brassicas in there to see if they'll grow decent, just to basically double up on our food on the backside of the field here. We're always leaving about an acre and a half, maybe 2 of whatever the standing crop is back here. This year it'll be corn. So since that's not being harvested, those brassicas are going to do just fine if I can get them to grow, because the picker's not going to be running through there, the combine, so it's not going to be crushing them and killing them. Same thing with those beans. Like I said, on the bean ears it's a little bit easier because those seeds won't get shaded out as much. I've never had a problem getting the rye to grow back there because it's so shade tolerant. But the brassicas are a little bit more finicky. Oh gosh. Another hammer. This is a different one. This is on this farm. I wonder if my brother's watching right now. He's at work right now. We're on the same account, so he's probably looking at these photos and being like, holy, that's a hammer. I bet he's 20 inches wide. Crazy long main beans. And text our group chat. Pretty awesome right now. That is a pig. That's right where I killed my buck last year. Call it the chute. I turned it up a notch down there this year. If you guys follow the channel, watch that mock scrape trail camera video I did. I walked you through the whole setup that I put up down there. I shifted the stand a 180 around on that tree because 90% of my deer are coming from one direction. I was facing the other direction, so I was having to turn around when those deer were approaching me and shoot down to my right, which is harder for a right-handed shooter. A lefty it'd be perfect, but I'm a right-handed shooter, so I was having to turn to my offside, and that's not easy to do during crunch time. So I made an adjustment on that stand, and it should help me out a lot as far as getting better shots down the road. But I added a mock scrape in there, added a camera in there, and you know, I talked about in that video too, there is, it's huge, it's really important to make sure you're hiding those cameras as well as you possibly can, because that spot, for instance, the chute stand where I killed last year, that's a spot that's highly intrusive, and the last thing that I ever want to happen is for a buck to go through there and know he's being monitored or know there's a human presence down there, because it's the transition between giant bedding hillsides, and if he gets a sense that he's being pursued or hunted down there, he's not going to tolerate it. Especially in those intrusive areas, deer do not tolerate human presence in there where they've never felt it before, and then you're going to look at the deer are going to start to adapt and move. So that's a spot where I was a little bit nervous about getting the camera in, just because I know there's a potential to screw it up really bad if I don't do it perfect. But so far I haven't even had a deer look at it yet, so I'm pretty happy about that. But basically what I did is I stayed a little bit farther away from that mock scrape where I hung that camera. I stayed farther away than a lot of places, strictly because I didn't want to take a chance. So I hung it probably 20 yards away, and then at the same time I put it up about 8-9 feet up the tree, and then with the topography the way it lays, the camera's up here, the scrape's down here, so down at deer level when they're hitting that scrape, it's probably 15-20 feet above their head, so they're not even looking up there. Oh, I know this deer. Now that I see him, I know that deer. I have a shed off him. I saw him last year too. Man, he's cool. He's a goofball. He wraps super tight, and he's kind of junky. Like, I don't think he's that big. I mean, he's big. I'll kill him this year if I see him. But he's one of those deer that, like, he's just never gonna be anything giant. Like, he's an 8-point frame. His beams wrapping super tight. They curl. And he didn't have much for tine length, not much for mass. He just doesn't have the frame for it, I guess. But he's 4 this year, so he'll be on the hit list for sure. You know, unless it's early season. Unless it's early season and, you know, I still have a lot of time left, I'm probably not going to pass him. I saw him down in the chute last year, and he must have been fighting because he was limping pretty good. But he came running some does in to about 12 yards. So I got a really good look at him. It was pretty fun. So I've already got 2 plots mowed here. This is the 3rd one. This is the most important plot that I was talking about here to you guys yesterday. I would say I'm going about 2.5-3 miles an hour. I'm taking it fairly slow just because it's such a thick thatch here that I want to chop it up really nice. And we're getting an earlier start than we did yesterday. You know, it's 4 here. It doesn't take nearly as long to mow these plots as it does to actually plant them. If you guys have any questions for me, let me know. Be happy to answer them. Also, drop in the chat where you guys are from. You guys are getting some food plots in the ground. Love to hear about it. I'm anticipating by middle of next week, all these plots I'm going to be able to see rows growing up. we timed it perfectly as far as getting rain and then mowing these things down. We're skimming some dirt right there, as you guys can see. A little bit of a hump in the plot. I remember that with the mower from last year. Just chopping up all this thatch, spreading it out along this plot here, creating a nice mulch right on top. That's real fine organic matter when you start cutting up these clover stalks. Should break down fairly quickly, but at the same time it's going to hold a lot of moisture right on my topsoil on those new seeds, because those seeds are going to be laying underneath that, and the sunlight's going to be hitting that mulch, and those seeds are going to stay moist under there on the topsoil because they're not getting direct sunlight. But at the same time, once those seeds start to germinate and grow up, all they've got to do is work through about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of green mulch, and they're going to hit sunlight and they're going to take off. And then as this fine organic matter starts breaking down and releasing all the nutrients that it's harbored over its lifetime, those are going to leach right back to the ground, and therefore become available for this fall blend that I just stuck in the ground last night. So it's a pretty cool system, reusing those nutrients and keeping those around for years. I got a couple trees overhanging here in this plot, so yesterday was a little bit of the trick to get that drill through a few of these spots here, but we should be able to wiggle it around with this mower. I like having some overhanging limbs in my plots strictly because, you know, this is one of those spots where I don't have a setup for a box scrape here because I don't have any trees really nearby my stand location. So having those overhanging limbs in the plots, those are natural box scrapes or natural scrapes, and they always get hammered. That 3-year-old I had in here last year that I was full draw on before I could tell what he was tearing up one of these overhanging limbs in the plot here before I got eyes on him. He was tearing it up, displaying a lot of dominance. So those are really important to really attract those deer and keep them around, keep them in the plots a little bit longer. Or at the same time, get them to stop for you while you're drawing back, looking to get a shot. Man, I'm really happy with how this brush hog's handling this stuff. This is excellent. It's doing a really, really nice job. Now I'm just gonna back up. This thing's sticking out probably 9 feet from the back of the 3-point, so I can reach a long ways back in here to get that stuff that I missed. I'm not gonna probably get all of it. I'll get most of it. Like I said, I'm running it all the way down because I want to cut those stems as low as possible and terminate that clover. This is that red clover. It's on its way out. It's on its 2nd year here, so a lot of it was browning out, but some of it was still green. So I'm just trying to make sure that that gets killed off. And if it doesn't get killed off, it's not the end of the world. You know, some of it might come back. A lot of it probably won't. But all that's going to do is that's going to reset that clover, and it's going to produce new young shoots, and it's going to fill in around my fall blend, which is not a problem at all. You know, that's actually good. It's beneficial. It's going to be attractive again. So. These lives showing you guys what I'm doing day to day as far as deer chores. You know, I worked this morning. I waterproof basements for a living. It's a business my dad took over about 30 years ago now, and I've been doing that since I was 15, 16 years old. So that's my day job. But I would say being a deer farmer is my 5 to 9. And then at the same time, I'm doing freelance outdoor video production. It's pretty cool because, you know, I'll kind of give a background story of, I guess, how far I've come with that stuff. I was basically an intern for a local YouTube channel hunting show. That's fairly big, you know. I think they got 30,000 subscribers on YouTube or whatever. You know, things just kind of fell apart there, but that's kind of how I got my start as far as making connections in the hunting space. That's how I got the connection to start filming for the Next by TV on the Discovery Channel. I've been with those guys for, this will be my 5th year with them. So basically starting as a kid, that, you know, making home YouTube videos of him hunting deer, and then now I'm filming for national television. It's pretty cool. But I mean, there's a lot of people that I have to thank for that. You know, guys teaching me stuff about film work, teaching me stuff about editing. I would be nothing without a lot of those guys. They all know who they are too. And then at the same time, just the people that have given me opportunities to work for them or help them. They're a huge reason I am where I am as well. But no, I mean, I'm just a regular dude. You know, I was a 9-to-5 dude, still am. Graduated high school, and I just had a dream, and I went after it. Like I was talking about a little bit yesterday, Luke just, you know, donated his time to come out and help me and learn, and that's exactly how I started too. You know, a lot of these guys that you think are way big league above your level, they're not. If you just show them you're willing to learn, show them you're willing to help, and that you know, you love this stuff, they'll give you a chance. So to the young guns out there, or even the guys that are a little bit older and they want to get into this space, just make yourself available, and show guys that you're willing to learn, and you're willing to help, and do whatever it takes to bust into this industry, because that's all I did, and it worked. the AC. It's getting a little warm. That sun's coming out. So at the same time, like in the springtime, I'm going to talk about switchgrass a little bit. In the springtime, I do a lot of burning as far as my switchgrass, but I know a lot of guys are a little bit timid when it comes to burning, and you know, I still am a little bit. It's a little bit sketchy sometimes, but I mean, you just have to have the right conditions, and you got to have enough guys on hand to cover all your bases. You have to have the right technique. You have to have the right equipment on hand as well. But if you guys have switchgrass, if you have native grasses and stuff that in the springtime you're looking to kind of get to restart for you, or regenerate a little bit better, if you have a lot of thatch that starts to build up after a few years, you can take a brush off to switchgrass too and reset that way, and that thatch is going to start breaking down for you. It doesn't always have to be fire that is, you know, immediate as far as getting rid of that thatch. It's going to be a longer breakdown time because you're not immediately burning it up, but it's going to do the same thing once that stuff does break down. So I didn't drill this spot because it's just a narrow strip, but I'll just raise this up a little bit. Maybe I can save some of that clover to throw in here. Not kill it. Just reset it. This plot is on a big inside corner that's sheltered by this fence line. I'm basically separating it from the big ag field. And, you know, it sets up perfect because, you know, everybody always talks about deer separation. You know, a big buck doesn't necessarily want to go feed where there's 15, 20 does out in the field. This is doing exactly that, just naturally. Just the way this farm lays out, it is breaking deer up. It's separating deer. So there could be 15, 20 deer out in the ag field. And if a buck's in this food plot, he would have no idea unless the wind was blowing back in here. But he wouldn't be able to see those deer because of A, the topography, and B, the screening cover. Now I added to that by putting switchgrass in and creating a little bit more of a buffer at deer level. But you know, originally this fence line was doing plenty. So I'll take the camera off and I'll kind of show you guys that. It sets up perfect. I'm trying to drive while I'm doing this. So you guys can see that switchgrass right here, basically just making a buffer. But this whole fence line, you know, there's briars in there, there's thick brush in there, but all of that was screening off this plot from, you can see the corn up high right there, all of that was already screening that. So I just went ahead and I made it better by adding that switchgrass in there at deer level. And then on top of that, there's a water hole that I set up right back in there. And majority of the deer are coming out of this corner here, right off that point. All of this is bedding down here. Right on this point is bedding as well. My stand location is right there. So I'm running a north or northeast wind out of here, and it's cutting back like that. So I'm blowing it into the field, but it's kind of blowing down this fence line. %of the trails, or 90% of the deer are going to take this trail right here, and I was hoping to increase that percentage when I put that water hole in there, and I think it'll do that. Now you can see maybe I've got fruit trees stacked in here as well, and down the road that's going to pull more deer on this side as well. So my wind direction side, this back side, is going to just get safer and safer because I'm pulling more deer right here in front of the stand versus behind me. Now this overhanging limb, that's a big scrape in the fall time. I've got a rope, one of those green vine ropes that I hung off it, and that's doing really well in there. I think it's on its 2nd or 3rd year. Now at the same time, I've got tree tubes right there with dogwoods in them, red osiers. And basically what I'm doing with that is just adding native browse along here. So that one's doing really well. It's just about out of the tube, but just adding attraction around this food plot, giving them every reason possible to come spend time here, especially during the daylight. Now you guys can see how nice that switchgrass is. You know, that's 6-7 feet tall, and it is thick. So at deer level, about 3.5–4 feet tall, you cannot see that field. You can't see out there. Now this whole backside has that ring of peas and brassica mix that I put in there because of that ag field space that was left over. So you guys can imagine this whole backside has even another ½ an acre of food on it. And then when I was talking about going through the cornfield earlier and planting brassica and rye, I'll just walk through these rows and I'll just broadcast that brassica and rye, and you can see my box blind right up there. That's a late season honey hole. I screwed up on a 160 out of there in 2019. Would have been my biggest deer still to date. I'm trying to think if I've killed another buck out of there. Guess I can't quite remember. I don't believe I have. Don't break. That's the only problem with having those overhanging limbs. Sometimes you'll rip a mirror off. Yeah, I'm going about 2.5–3 miles an hour, taking her nice and slow, making sure I chop all of that thatch up really, really nice. I'll get all these plots done here tonight. I only got one more after this, and then I'll go ahead and do the other two probably Friday. You can almost bale this thatch. There's that much of it. dirt in it too. So, as far as hunts this year that I have planned, you guys saw my bear video, I would imagine. I'm going to be doing that hunt again next spring up in Manitoba. But this fall, me and my dad are going to be going to New Mexico on a mule deer hunt. I've been mule deer hunting before, but just filming. So this will be the first time that I'll have a weapon in hand chasing muleys. So I'm pretty excited about that. We're going to be using a rifle. My favorite way of hunting is bow hunting, but at the same time I really love rifle hunting too. You know, just the tradition behind rifle hunting is really fun to me. Especially when you get in wild places like that. Never been to New Mexico, so it's going to be a whole adventure for us. We're going to be going there first week, towards the end of the first week in November, second week. So we're going to have to be efficient during the rut here in Wisconsin. Get the job done. I love that last week of October though. That's when I really focus in on killing a deer. Especially if you get the right weather. If you get the right weather in the end of October, I don't think you can beat that time frame. This plot's about 1/3 of an acre. Now, with those fruit trees that I planted them in front of my stand location. Now, a lot of guys would be like, why are you doing that? You know, you're gonna block off your shots. Well, these are dwarf apple trees. And so my thought process behind it is I kind of mapped out how tall 12 to 14 feet on those apples is gonna be. And with the angle to my water hole from that stand, I'm literally gonna be able to shoot over top of those apple trees right to my water hole. So basically what we're looking at is like my apple trees are growing 12 to 14 feet high, and they're or screening a ladder on that stand. And then here's me on top. Like all you're gonna be able to see is the base of the stand and me. And then I'm just shooting right on top of those trees, right to that water hole. So just adding that cover, it's gonna be really fun to see how that turns out. You know, if they do get a little bit tall, I'll just top them off. Keep them growing short like that. Some of these thicker areas might have to get run over again, just to bust them up a little bit more, but most part it's doing a really good job. Like I said, this clover was on the tall side. It was 2.5 to 3 feet tall, so it's a lot of material. I'll jump out and I'll show you guys kind of what we got going on. These brush hogs are tough. The amount of torque coming off that PTO shaft through those blades is a ton. Kind of amazing that these things don't break. You guys can probably see that behind me, the difference. I mean, it's chopping all this up. It's just laying it right down on top of that new seed. Alright, so as you can see, this is what we're looking at. You know, this is still some old rye breaking down, but we've got a beautiful mulch that we're just laying right over top of that new seed in here. Let me see if I can find some of my drill cuts here, my trenches. Here's a trench. You can see it. I've kind of even closed it off a little bit just by driving over this, which is not a bad thing. Here's an oat that got left high. Yep, some of these seeds got a little bit high. But yeah, you can see that's just laying right over top of those seeds, providing that moisture barrier for it. All that fine organic matter, it's going to break down fairly quick, a lot faster than like a real tall rye would. Here you can see some of my trenches. That seed laying right in there, and then I'm just gonna run that brush hog right over top of this and cut this all up. You can see, you know, you can't feel what I'm feeling right now, but that is soaking wet. I mean, that is a beautiful moisture barrier. Thought I had a seed already growing. I mean, just a gorgeous mat right here. So we're gonna keep her rolling here. I get about 3-4 passes left on this plot, and then we're gonna be moving on to the last one. I feel like I deserve a little bit of an earlier night than last night. I didn't get in till like 9 o'clock last night, so a little bit tired heading off to work this morning. Put that drill back, and then went and started in on the day job. So we haven't used this brush hog in years, probably. So before my parents left for vacation, me and my old man went ahead and greased all the ports up. And we weren't sure the status of it, you know, the condition, if it was going to be working right or not, so I'm pretty happy that everything's functioning well on it. Definitely running through the diesel though. I filled this thing up yesterday before I started, and I'm down to about a quarter tank, so hopefully I can finish everything up on this tank. So we're looking like mid-70s, mid to upper 70s for the next week or so. That's perfect growing conditions. Not too super hot where we're going to lose a lot of moisture from the heat, and then just hot enough to get really good germination out of these seeds. Buddy's playing his plots this weekend, so he's asking for my assistance. I can think of worse things to do. There's a gnarly rub right here from a buck back in 2020 we called Brick. He was a big mainframe 8, but he was a 9-point. He had mass for days. He had 4.5 or 5-inch mass measurements all the way around. And my niece ended up killing him during gun season, but that was the deer that laid that rub. Super predictable deer, but I just could never get on him for some reason. You know, he was always in daylight, or he was always right around daylight. Back then too, I didn't know nearly as much about deer behavior as I do now. Just strictly because of my time in the field, you know, it takes time to figure things out. And, you know, it's just out of high school, starting to really get some time in the woods, and you know, that deer kind of drove me crazy because I knew I was on him, but I just never got an opportunity at him. But those are the ones I feel like that teach you the most. I used to be super conservative as far as when I would go in after deer. Like, I'd have one in daylight, but I'd say, well, he's not really, you know, he's not very far into daylight, so I'll just wait. And I waited until the opportunity already passed. So there's a fine line between being too conservative as far as going in on a deer if he's doing what you want, and you know, not conservative enough. But if you have a deer daylight and he's doing what you need him to do to get a shot at him, I'm of the thought process now that you need to go, and go now, because things change so much and so quickly in the fall that, you know, that might be your only 2-3 day window to get a shot at him. So when you see a pattern occurring, you need to take your chance. And then at the same time, historical data too. Like, if you got a history with a deer, and you know he starts getting a lot more predictable, say last week of October, or maybe like the 20th of October. He's daylighted a couple times in year past on this set of weather conditions, and you've got similar conditions this year, and it's the same time period. I'd use a little bit of intuition and go in there and assume he's going to show up, because when deer get old like that, a lot of times they do the same stuff over and over again. Especially from that 4 to 6 year old range. Like if they've started doing something at 4 years old and then he does it again at 5, you can bet at 6 he's probably going to do the same thing. Or at 2 and 3 he was doing something, and then at 4 you're thinking, well, he's mature now. But at 2 and 3, that's a smart deer already. And if he's gotten away with doing something at 2 and 3 years old, even though he's now considered mature, he's probably still going to do it at 4. Like that deer I just got him on camera down at the chute. I'm predicting that deer is going to show up down in that area in the last week of October, at least at some point, because he did it last year. He was a 3-year-old last year. He didn't get boogered out of there, and I have a picture of him down there right now. That means he still feels safe down there. He still feels comfortable, and he's still that's still in his core area. Even though it is a summer picture, that's the first time I've seen that deer this year. So he's coming through there because he's checking things out for fall. You know, a lot of deer during the summer are going to come check out areas that is in their fall core area, just to make sure nothing's drastically changed, to make sure like what they left last year is still pretty similar to what they're going to be coming back to. That's why, like, sometimes if you have a massive logging operation that happens and you've got a 4-year-old deer that is gone during the winter, but he was there during the fall, you know, you have it logged, say January, February, he comes back maybe during May or June to check things out, and all of this timber's like down, that might freak him out to the point where he might not come back. But in the grand scheme of things down the road, that's going to be dramatically improving that property. But if it happens right when a deer is spending time there and he liked it the way it was, and you dramatically change it, you might throw him for a loop and he might just disappear on you. But you have to understand that it's going to pay you back in the long run to create all that new native regeneration in those areas, and then promote that side cover by opening the canopies. So it's a plus and minus situation. The first 2 good deer I've had here, probably this week or in the last 4 or 5 days, because like I said, this is more of that fall geared, late fall property. These deer are just roaming through, checking things out, making sure it's still the way they like it, the way they left. this spot right here, this edge, all used to be, let's see if I can turn this thing. I can. This whole edge right next to this food plot bordering it used to be probably 30-40 foot popple trees. So I came through here and I whacked them all down, and I just made a mess right here because the deer were coming up all the way along this food plot. And to effectively bow hunt this plot, I need to narrow these deer down as far as what trails they're coming on, or else I can't predict where my shots are going to be. And at the same time, it's harder to hunt it because my wind direction is always going to be up in the air, because if I have a deer coming behind me and going up to the field here, eventually he's going to get downwind of me. Whereas if I can shut off the entrance to the plot back here, my wind blowing back here is safe. So I basically made a mess through here, blocked it all off, and I'm forcing them to enter down on that side of the plot. Upwind of where I'm blowing my scent. So it just makes it that much more predictable to bow hunt this spot, and then at the same time that much safer because I know where the deer are going to be coming. Now, this spot during the rut, this being an inside corner, I've watched bucks run across this field and cut this corner before, and this is one of those stand locations where if it's a morning during the rut and I feel like there's a lot of activity going on in this area, I'll hunt that stand in any wind direction. That's one of the things that my dad has taught me, and I wasn't a believer in it for a long time, but he just kept killing good deer, hunting the wrong stands on the wrong wind. Eventually, the results took my opinion and threw it in the garbage. Sometimes you just have to get in the right spot and bank on the deer coming from the right direction. I've had a lot of crazy hunts where, you know, it should not have worked out because I was hunting it in the complete wrong wind direction for where they should come from. But during the rut, you have no idea where they're going to come from. And sometimes you got to bank on luck. Sometimes you got to bank on those deer just being rut crazed to the point where they're not paying that much attention, and all of a sudden they're on you, and they weren't paying enough attention to catch you by the time you've got an arrow in them. But I've gotten busted doing it that way a couple times as well. You know, you got to have the right deer in the right circumstances. Sometimes they're not rut crazed to the point where they don't care, and sometimes they are. That's what's fun about hunting though too. When things work out and they should work out, those are the best stories. Like back in 2020, I killed a nice 8-pointer with my bow, and I killed him on November 2nd. But Halloween morning, I went down into this bedding area, and I went down in there because it's just a crazy spot. It's a valley. There's always giants running around down there. And when you get into that last week of October, early November, you have no idea what could show up. And so it's one of those locations where the wind is so unpredictable that it doesn't matter what direction it's coming out of. You know, you're going to lose something, and then at the same time, all all of the different wind currents that go on down there. Even in the morning, your thermals are pulling up this way, but they're also pulling up this way because it's right in the middle of a bowl and there's hillsides pulling up all over the place. That's why the deer are down there, because all the scent collects. And so I went down in there. I was full draw on the deer I eventually didn't kill up here, that 160. He walked out of my life because I didn't have lanes cut, because it's one of those spots. I just brought a climber down there. But when I was going down in there, I had this climber. I didn't have a trail cut to the stand. I had about 250 yards to walk down into this bedding hillside, into that bowl. It was frosty that morning. It's nothing but oak trees down there. I fell like twice going down this steep hill. I was banging that climber on branches, and I had to cross the fence. Like I said, I fell a couple times, and as I'm walking down into this bowl, all I can hear is deer blowing and running all over the place. And by the time I got down to the tree I was hunting out of, and I got set up, I was thinking, you know, I just blew this spot up for the whole season. There's not a chance I see anything today, and I was just pissed off. I was upset with myself because I didn't do any of the work I should have done to get stuff ready in there. And wouldn't you know it, at 8 a.m. in the morning, about an hour and a half after daylight, that 160 came through. I was full draw on him, couldn't get a shot. And then and I ended up calling him in too. And then that was the deer I was after down in that area as well. And it just didn't work out. But I got a bunch of film of him. But then 45 minutes after he left, I called in another 8-pointer that I eventually ended up killing. But I called him in, and he wrote the book for me, and I shoulder shot him, and my arrow bounced off his shoulder. So one of those situations where you have two shooters come in after you blow the entire bedding area out. You fall slipping down the hill 2 times, making all kinds of racket, and it still turned into one of the best hunts of my life. Now, that 8-pointer that I hit in the shoulder, you know, I watched him pull the arrow. It was in about an inch. I watched him grab it with his teeth and pull it out. And then a couple days later, I was hunting on that same hillside. I called him in again, but he winded me. And then, like I said, on November 2nd, I was bleeding on that same hillside, but at the top of it, where my wind was more true. And I called him in to 33 yards, and I put it right behind the shoulder, double lunged him, and he went 65 yards, and that was the end of that. So just one of those examples that sometimes if things are going wrong, it can still work out. You know, I've had some of my best hunts when I've spooked the most deer either going in or coming out. You know, when you get into that end of October, early November, not even just then, I think I'm a great believer that deer blow a lot more than we think they do. Deer blow at coyotes, deer blow at trucks, tractors, other deer. That's one of the main things I think a lot of hunters don't realize is deer blow at other deer very, very often. So just because you hear a deer blow maybe at you, maybe at something else, doesn't mean the hunt's over. And it doesn't mean that it's going to spook every other deer in the woods. Yeah, it might get their attention, but I've also watched deer, and I've heard deer blowing from 100 yards away, and I've watched deer feeding in front of me and not care whatsoever, not even lift their head. So I think it's a way more common sound than a lot of hunters think, and I don't think that it's as disruptive as we think it is. Like I've watched, you know, when does aren't ready or not in estrus yet, during that 20th of October to say the 24th, 25th, and they've got bucks chasing them. I've watched does blow at bucks because they want them to leave them alone. So when you get into that late October, early November time period, and then even throughout November when you still have that secondary rut, and then every month after that if there's still doe fawns and stuff that need to be bred, if there's bucks chasing does and stuff around and they don't want to be bothered, they will blow at them. So there's something that I've noticed over the last few years, that it's not the end of the world if you have a deer blowing. Down to my last couple passes here. Come back out here this evening and just grab some of these clumps and shake them up, just to spread them out a little bit. I was worried about this brush hog not getting low enough, or not cutting these stems low enough, but seeing it now, I should have been, because this is doing a really nice job as far as getting plenty low to the ground. And you see it there. It was basically chewing that dirt up. Just brush hogging. Got a doe. Nope. I'm gonna order those videos from down at that shoot stand, because I really enjoy watching the videos from those cameras, because you can kind of determine what type of deer you're dealing with. You know, if you get enough videos of a deer, you can tell if he's a little bit of a skittish deer and he doesn't like confrontation, especially if there's other deer in the video. You can kind of determine what his personality is. So that way, the more I know about a deer's personality, the better I can understand, okay, this is a deer that I do not want to call at. I do not want to get aggressive with this deer as far as grunting at him if I see him, or snort wheezing or rattling, whatever that is. Like during that rut time period, the more I can figure out about that deer as far as what he acts like, the more efficiently I can hunt him. I really like having them on mock scrapes, because if I can determine, you know, if I have a deer come into a mock scrape and he's pawing the ground real hard, he's working that vine super hard, I can tell immediately that he thinks he's the king of that area. Now, I've had a couple deer continually keep coming back to this mock scrape. So I had a big freak of an 8-point with a big flyer off his base hit my scrape yesterday. And the timing of him hitting that tells me everything I need to know about what that deer is like. Now, I had a 4-year-old 8-point, really clean stud come in about 35 minutes before that freak. He came in, hit that mock scrape, and everything that I need to know about that freak buck I experienced yesterday. That deer came in right after that 4-year-old. He came into that mock scrape and he was covering his scent on that scrape. He was telling that buck when that 4-year-old comes back, don't try it again. This is my area. This is my scrape. Don't mess with me. Because when a buck comes in immediately after another buck to cover their scent, that's what he's telling him. He's not telling him, oh, I guess we can both play here. That older deer, that bigger deer, is coming in to tell him, this is my scrape, this is my area in the fall, don't even think about it. Or there's going to be consequences. That's what he's telling him, and that's how that hierarchy in bucks works. So just knowing, just seeing that sequence of photos, that tells me that that's the dominant deer in the area. At least he thinks he is, and he's going to act like it. So if I'm in a spot where I can call out that deer and I can throw a grunt at him, he's not going to run off and get scared by that. He's going to hear that and he's probably going to get pissed off, and he's probably going to come display dominance. So just knowing when you're dealing with an older, more mature deer, how to approach them as far as if you have them within eyesight during the right time of the year, and how they're going to react. Paying attention to that throughout the year with your cameras is a big deal. Now that 4-year-old, that's one of those deer that I still have yet to figure out. You know, he's hitting that mock scrape, he's communicating with the other deer, but since he now knows that there's a bigger, more mature deer that he probably has had a run-in or two with in the past in that area, you know, that just tells me that be a little bit more careful with him as far as getting aggressive with calling, because he might think, oh boy, it's him again, it's that big 5-6-year-old, I'm not even gonna mess with him, because you don't know what happened the night before. Maybe they fought the night before and he got his butt kicked, and now when he comes rolling through that morning, you're calling at him, displaying a bunch of dominance through vocals on your grunt call, and you're freaking him out. So you might just run him right off. Attention to those things is key. Just chopping salad. Wish that this brush hog had like an opening in the back so it could throw all that thatch out a little bit better, but I understand why it doesn't, so it doesn't throw rocks and stems and stuff out and potentially hurt someone. One more to go, and then we are done for the day. Come through here in the next couple days and just shake out and spread those clumps up so I don't have bare spots in this plot. But considering how wet it is, this stuff is not clumping nearly as bad as it could be. Done by 6. Pretty happy about that. Got about a quarter, a little over a quarter tank left to be able to get it done. I've got 4 fruit trees right here that I planted this spring, and all of them are just about out of the tree tubes, and they're 6-foot tree tubes. So it's been an excellent year as far as growing trees. We've had plenty of rain, we've had good weather. When you put them in those tree tubes, it really, really sets them off on a good head start. One thing that I've learned, and I don't have all of I can't explain the whole process, but trees can't photosynthesize when wind speeds are above 15 miles an hour. So if you have an apple tree in a cage, it's not growing anytime that there's wind speeds greater than 15 miles an hour. So by having those trees in a tree tube, a plastic tree tube like that, you're protecting that tree from wind speeds of 15 miles an hour and greater. And what that's doing is you're not losing any of those days that it's blowing 20 miles an hour, but it's still 75 degrees out and there was rain. You're not losing any of those days as far as growth that you would be if you just put it in a cage. So having a tree tube, those trees are guaranteed growing every single day because you're never losing days that are blowing over 15 miles an hour. But if you just cage them with, say, chicken wire, any day that's blowing 15 miles an hour or greater, that tree's not growing. It's closing itself off to protect it. Now, like I said, I don't know all the scientific studies behind it, but I thought that was a pretty interesting fact. Alright, now this one is about 1/8 of an acre. Shouldn't take real long. I would not want to get my hand underneath when those blades are spinning. That would not be fun. So this plot, out of all of them, probably had the most weed competition because this was the worst pigweed plot we had, but it had a lot of red clover in it as well. Down here there was a lot of thistles, but coming through here with this brush hogger, we're going to knock all those down. Plot that hasn't been producing the daytime activity that it used to either, strictly because the side this is on is getting pressure that it never used to. So they kind of turned off movement in this area. far as daytime, anyways. So my goal for this year is to kill another really nice deer on camera, but the amount of footage that I've accumulated over the last year, I want to really spend some time on the video and make it something really special. It's difficult to really really make a high quality film when you're self-filming, because you're doing so many different things. You're multitasking as far as trying to get